All right, welcome into Pod to Win the Game. I am Charles Robinson here with Jori Epstein. We are giving you a post-free agency, at least week, the big free agency push, Power Rankings edition. We'll get into news next week. Jori and I are going to be at the league meetings, so we can dive into all that stuff. We wanted to take this moment, though, to get into what you and I think are going to be the top 7 teams from the AFC and NFC at this point in the offseason. Obviously, pre-draft, still some free agency sweeping to be done. But I also wanted to get from you, and I'm kind of springing this on you in the pod. I want one plummet team as well. Ooh. From both the AFC and NFC teams. So we're going to give each other our top 7, maybe a little thought process into each ranking, and then pick a team from each conference that we just think there's the possibility that it's a rock sinking to the bottom of the lake.
I just want to let our listeners know that, like, you're doing this probably being like, oh, yeah, I already thought of mine, but let's spring it on you. Oh,
totally. 100%. Yeah, absolutely. I was not going to let you know. I have a couple picked out, done my research on them.
Let me just push the start of recording 30 minutes as I come up with this plan that I will thoroughly report and then just spring on you.
I don't think there's going to be anything really thorough about any of this. Just, I have my cheat sheet, so I'm definitely going to have to bounce back and forth between my cheat sheet. Do you want to start with AFC or NFC first? Dealer's choice.
Let's start with AFC. The Super Bowl defending champion conference.
Okay, I'll tell you what. All right, so let's go number 1. Who's your number 1?
Cincinnati Bengals.
Really? Wow. Right off the bat, you're pushing the Bengals to the top this year. Come on. No, I got Chiefs. I absolutely have the Chiefs at number 1. But you give me your ideology behind the Bengals. I'll give you my ideology behind the Chiefs.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, for me, look, do I think that the Chiefs could win another Super Bowl? 100%. But do I think that the Bengals are going to be the more talented roster going in? Yes. And I think that's probably even the case when you factor in the quarterbacks. Patrick Mahomes is a better quarterback than Joe Burrow, but I think Joe Burrow is slowly getting closer. And then when you add in what the Bengals defense is capable of doing, the fact that they have Orlando Brown now protecting Joe Burrow, which, by the way, also means that he's not protecting Patrick Mahomes. And though I think that the offensive line won't be like 2020 season bad. Do you remember that Buccaneers Chiefs Super Bowl? Because I think it's hard to forget what the offensive line did there. And so I think that you got guys like him on the way out of Kansas City, guys like Frank Clark on the way out. And I just feel like Cincinnati has these pieces. They know they're in the window. Their defensive coordinator, they're pretty lucky they kept him from getting a head coach opportunity. And I think they've got the coaching, the scheme, the players, and they've shown they know how to beat the Chiefs.
I do think there's credence there. I don't think Burrow's close to Mahomes. I think he's close-ish in terms of, is Josh Allen close to Mahomes? Sure. Is Burrow close to Mahomes? But Mahomes, to me, continues to class himself above and beyond everyone else. I think this guy's going to be a MVP candidate every single year unless they dramatically screw up the situation around him. We'll see what happens with Travis Kelce when he ages out. I'm just not as concerned about this whole Orlando Brown situation as maybe everybody else is. To me, I think if Orlando Brown, if his market had been a little stronger once he went to free agency, I mean, we ultimately saw the deal that he signed. He left millions and millions of dollars on the table. He could have done an extension with the Chiefs a year ago. He probably lost out on $4 to $5 million APY by leaving the team. So to me, I sit there and I'm like, I don't think NFL teams look at him and say, yeah, left tackle. I know he wants to play left tackle. I know he wants to honor his father. I get all that. I just don't see the rest of the league looking at him and saying, well, geez, this is just such a huge loss at the left tackle position. I think people think he's a right tackle who's playing left tackle, and there's a reason why his market was what it was ultimately. What do I think about Jawan Taylor stepping in for the Chiefs and filling that role? I don't know. I mean, I don't know yet. We'll see. I think he's obviously the younger player. I still think there's some ceiling there. We can also argue that he's also a right tackle in the NFL. But to me, I think what continues to make me lean toward the Chiefs was because last offseason, I questioned what they were going to look like losing Tyreek Hill. You know, I sat there and I thought this to me felt like a team. I was so nervous about Was the offense going to be in flux? Defensively, are they going to be able to find the playmakers? Where's the pass rush? All these questions that I had. And then I watched over the course of the season, Mahomes absolutely killed it. I think they played a lot of rookies, right? They had rookies who got a lot of snaps last year. All those players, I think, are going to take a step forward. Okay. I think that's a big plus. And then I don't think they're done. I think there's still a chance that there is an addition at some point this offseason to the skill positions. I don't know that it'll be Odell Beckham Jr. I think if Odell Beckham Jr. was smart, go play with 15. Okay. So I don't, that's to me, I would really, really like to see that ultimately happen. If Odell's not going to make a ton of money out there and his market isn't as strong as maybe some believed it would be, get with Patrick Mahomes and we will see where that relationship can go. As far as the Bengals, I'll get into the Bengals when I get to their ranking. But I feel like even though the overall roster, top to bottom, you could make the argument that the Bengals are maybe ascending a little bit more than the Chiefs. I still think Mahomes is the difference maker. And until someone knocks him off consistently in the AFC, you're going to have to prove it to me that he doesn't continue to own that crown. I am assuming the Chiefs are your number 2.
Oh, yeah, the Chiefs are definitely number 2. And look, I don't think that they can't be number 1. I just think going into the season, and maybe this is a little bit of free agency bias, which is funny because free agency moves, I feel like, go poorly more often than they go well. So I'm clearly drinking the Kool-Aid of free agency right now. But yeah, definitely. I mean, and when I say Burrow is getting close to Mahomes, I don't mean in terms of raw talent. I mean in terms of what he's able to do with his offense given the pieces around him. And thus, I think his pieces give him so much more help than Mahomes. And so at some point, if Mahomes is compensating by 50%, but Burrow's got 60% better talent, whatever it is, I think that's sort of how I'm looking at it. But yeah, definitely, I think that the Chiefs showed us last year what happens when you doubt them altogether. So I don't think that they're going to have this. I mean, they would never be close to my plummet team, but I do think that they're not necessarily going to win the conference going in. And it also wouldn't surprise me if the Bengals are NFC leaders, or sorry, AFC leaders coming out of the regular season, and then the Chiefs still take them in the playoffs. So that's where I think some of this comes in. But I like that. I like that even though on one hand you could say the AFC versus NFC quarterback conversation, even general talent conversation in some ways is just so disparate. I love that you've got these teams in the AFC that are making pushes and that make it doesn't just feel like a guarantee to me that the Chiefs will be in the Super Bowl next year. I think that it's highly likely that they should be a favorite, but I think that there are teams like the Bengals, and we'll get to some of the ones in a little bit, that go down that. Who did you have as number 2?
Well, I had the Bengals.
Okay.
I figured AFC, NFC, we're going to have this sort of similarities at the top of the list. Maybe we flip-flop a team here or there, but top to bottom, I do like the Bengals roster. I do like what they've done this offseason.
Now he likes the Bengals
roster. Hey, at number 2, that's fine. Once we get past the quarterback position, and again, I like Burrow.
How big a drop off from 1 to 2 for you, though?
I would put those 2 in the AFC championship game. So, I mean, to me, they look like the 2 best teams in the AFC. To me, the division really, it comes down to the quarterback spot. As much as I like Burrow, I also can't deny that Burrow, skill position wise, has had more to work with, at least last year, than Patrick Mahomes ultimately did. Mahomes has the Kelsey advantage, of course, but I think he's raising the talent level in other spots. Whereas Joe Burrow, I mean, look, he had to deal with obviously the offensive line, the injuries down the stretch really, I think, hurt the Bengals in a way that it hadn't the balance of the regular season. It made a difference eventually in the playoffs. So, I think adding Orlando Brown to the mix is a plus because Jonah Williams was not, he was a problem. He was a problem player, and then he was injured. And now I think there's a very good chance that he gets traded headed into the draft. I'll be curious to see what they could get out of him at this point. But what I like about the Bengals is continuity. We had a possibility of losing the offensive coordinator, the defensive coordinator this offseason. And that didn't happen. So I like the fact that you have coaching continuity. I do look at the Chiefs and think, okay, Eric Bieniemy goes out the door. Curious to see if that puts any kind of a dent in what happens in Kansas City. I don't think it will, but we'll see. But I do like the coaching continuity. I do like the fact that anytime you add to an offensive line with a player that I expected to have a much more robust market than he ultimately did in Orlando Brown, it's a good thing. We'll see how this works with him. Left tackle there, and how they feel about it after a season. So, yeah, my 1-2. We're going to be close on in the AFC 1-2. I think most people would put Chiefs Bengals or Bengals Chiefs 1-2. I'm always going to tilt toward the MVP quarterback that Patrick Mahomes is. Number 3. I think we're going to start to get a little dicier now at this point in the list.
Okay, well, let's both. I'll say it, you say it, and then I'll explain. Miami Dolphins.
Wow. Yeah. See, this is Jacksonville Jaguars.
Okay. I mean, I've got them at 5.
Okay, 2 interesting picks. Let me go first with Jacksonville. Interesting thing about Jacksonville, we talk about all this money gets spent in free agency, right? And often we talk about how it does not really help teams. You know, we're like, all the teams that are on the top end spending in free agency, it's usually not a good thing, right? Well, Jacksonville spent a ton of money in free agency in the offseason prior to the 2022 season. And then look, they had the turnaround. Now the turnaround, everyone's going to point at Doug Peterson. They're going to say the functionality of the head coach, the quarterback, Trevor Lawrence, getting himself on track, and then just hitting their stride down the season. I do think the additions, some of the money that they spent in free agency helped a lot. I do think the coaching made a difference. But to me, now you're adding Calvin Ridley to a skill position mix that's really going to stay the same. You keep Evan Engram, which I think was a big deal at the tight end spot. It just feels to me like it's just the ascending team. And it's a quarterback, by the way, who I think Trevor Lawrence, we could be saying, okay, what's the difference between Mahomes and Lawrence? All right, well, what's the difference between Lawrence and Allen and Joe Burrow? That, I think, if he's not there already, I think 2023, we're going to get Trevor Lawrence into that second, position behind Mahomes. I think that makes a huge difference. And they're chock full of young guys that are going to have another year of development. So I really like them as a very, very strong 3 in the AFC.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's a very good point. And it was definitely pretty clear to me that they belonged in this conversation, even if not at 3 for me. For me, I went Miami Dolphins. And look, I would maybe even put them higher not higher, but I would feel even stronger about this if I thought Tua could play 12 games. I don't need him 17, but 12. And if I thought that, I'm not saying he stays fully healthy, but that the concussions didn't factor in, because I just think those are a whole different ballpark physically, emotionally, mentally, team morale. If you take that out, I think that they're super strong. For me, you have this Mike McDaniel offense that in its first year just lit up the league and was so fast, was so explosive. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. I think Tyreek will be good for at least 2-3 more years. I think you've got some good play coming out of him. And then you look at this offense that we knew was working. And then on defense, they've been aggressive. They get Bradley Chubb at the trade deadline. Now they've got Jalen Ramsey coming over to go with the secondary. And I think that, though, again, I don't want to overreact to things happening in March or at the trade deadline. We see this team that had a head coach come in and just take this league by storm. Had the talent, added talent. And if you look at the last couple Super Bowl champions, and I'm not saying the Dolphins are there, but if you look at them in terms of what worked in team building, the Eagles were really aggressive. The Rams were really aggressive. Tom Brady goes to the Buccaneers. Obviously, Tom Brady's in his own category, but still an aggressive move. I think that you have to be aggressive in today's NFL to compete. Now, what that means for your long-term viability versus in a year, we're seeing some of that in Los Angeles right now. But I do think that the Dolphins see their talent and are chasing their window and are putting real skill positions and players who are not yet past their prime at these positions. And when you look at the Jalen Ramsey deal, he wanted to go to Miami and was willing to be a little more flexible with his deal because of that. And I think when you have a team like that that's got the talent and is attracting players like that, we don't usually see that in the NFL, but I don't know. I just think that they could be really, really strong.
Yeah, I'll get into the Dolphins once I get to that portion of my rankings. The thing with the Dolphins, it's
nother
be the
portion.
Same. Yeah, well, they're going to be my top 7. Okay, clearly. There's no question. And I really like what they did this offseason. I'll get into that, what I like about them. we're never going to. The thing with Tua, this season to me determines whether or not we this is like a career thing that we're always talking about. We're
Yeah.
always thinking about. I think coming out of 2022, we're assuming that anyway, that we're always going to be thinking about concussions. Whether he suffers one in 2023 or 2024 or whenever, it will always be on our minds. I think if he can get through the 2023 season without missing games, suffering a concussion, something of that nature, then I think people will feel a hell of a lot better about where the Dolphins are at, how solid a pick they are. Arguably, other than where's Aaron Rodgers going to go, other than what's going to ultimately happen with Lamar Jackson, Tua's health is arguably the biggest question in the NFL's playoff picture into the 2023 season, just because we have no idea how much we can trust that they can keep him protected, keep him healthy. When a player is like literally talking about learning how to fall the right way, oh man, like that's a dicey, having to figure out how to fall without letting your head hit the ground. Good luck. I mean, that's a tough thing to resolve. So
No, I think that your use of the words playoff picture is really important here, because for me, if Tua is not healthy, I think you're going to have trouble going deep in the playoffs. But in the regular season, I still think that you need him. But I think that signing Mike White was a really sharp move for them at backup quarterback, because you saw what he could do with the Jets. You saw the way he came in and got teammates to rally around him, and also physically was able to make some moves. And he's got better talent around him now in Miami on offense. And so I think he can help tide you over during the regular season to make that push and position you better for a playoff spot if Tua's out. But I agree that once you get to the playoffs, you need a healthy Tua, or a healthy enough Tua.
all right, I'll give you my AFC 4. And then we can flip over to yours. So I'm gonna slot the Buffalo Bills at 4. You've had losses defensively. Tremaine Edmonds goes out. You keep Jordan Poyer, but the age is starting to become a factor, particularly at that position. But then I look at, I guess to me, what's concerning is Josh Allen. He's got to have more help than Stephon Diggs, right? You look at the skill positions there, and tight end has never flourished the way we really truly expected it to, right? I think we thought Knox was going to be a player that would take a huge monumental step forward and be one of like top 2 or 3 tight ends in the league. It's kind of flashes on and off. The wide receiver position beyond Diggs needs, I think, a veteran, reliable piece. Somebody's got to be able to step in there and be a very good high-end number 2. You're going to have to compete with Cincinnati, which has a multitude of options, skill position-wise. I told you, I think the Chiefs, there's still a chance that they add to the wide receiver mix there. I just think from a running back standpoint and a very reliable second fiddle standpoint at the wide receiver spot, they need help. And this offseason, I'm waiting for it. I mean, I think there's been opportunities. I think there are players that they could deal for or even sign at this stage that could help them in both of those avenues. Now, maybe they address it in the draft. We'll see. But I to me, that continues to weigh on a Buffalo offense that I do think is missing Brian Daboll, and we're going to continue to see that moving forward. And I do think is continuing to put too much pressure on Josh Allen. Now, top 4 in the AFC, that's great. But this was supposed to be Buffalo's time right now. They were supposed to be the number 1 team in the 2023 rankings when we looked at, if we were talking about this last offseason, right? Instead, it kind of feels like they're dragging a little bit. And I don't know what this team's going to look like without Von Miller. I mean, eventually you're going to get him back in the fold. We'll see what his health's at. Too many questions right now, and I think that pushes them to 4.
Yeah, so I have at number 4 the New York Jets. And I would like to say that this is less about buying into the Aaron Rodgers hype than realizing the skill and the weaponry that they already had that are the reason that Aaron Rodgers wants to go there. Undoubtedly, he gets in, he stays healthy or even close to healthy, he's going to make them a much better team. He's still one of the most talented quarterbacks in the NFL today. But I think you go there and he's coming to guys like Garrett Wilson. You can get Breece Hall coming back. And again, you were just talking about the Bills losing some of their key run support guys in defense. And it's like, well, the New York Jets can make them pay for that. I think they already had, as you said, this top 5 defense. They already have the skills. And so I think that, I don't know. And going back to the Bills, and we'll get to where I put them, it's more about that division. I think that division is going to be fascinating in the AFC East, but I really do trust Aaron Rodgers to put an already extremely talented roster over the top. So I have them at 4.
Well, I'm glad you put them 4 because that seamlessly transitions into number 5 for me. The Jets, to me, I'm going to stick them at number 5. Although there is a caveat. I think they could be a lot better than 5, actually.
Yeah.
I think they could be a top 2 team in the AFC. Part of that's predicated, obviously, on Aaron Rodgers getting there.
And how quickly he gets there, I think, will make a difference.
Yeah, I do.
How much are they in this sort of purgatory?
I think having the OC, though, and Nathaniel Hackett helps. So even if it takes some time for him ultimately getting there, you do have Hackett there, who he's familiar with. You will have Alan Lazard there, who he's familiar with. I'd be surprised if they didn't add either Randall Cobb or Mercedes Lewis or both by the time this is all said and done. So there will be at least some familiarity. Also, I tend to believe that everybody's lying anyway. And I think, to me, in my mind, is he already working on the Jets playbook? Yeah, probably. I assume that there's all kinds of stuff is going on under the table right now between Aaron Rodgers and the Jets.
Hackett and Alan Lazard, when they were at dinner last week that Lazard was tweeting about, they're just like, they're actually in this private room with a screen up, and Aaron's got the Zoom on that same screen going through the playbook.
Yeah, I think it's pretty. And that's the thing, too. Remember, Lazard being there, that helps the situation because he'll be working with the other wide receivers in that room. Even if Aaron's not there, Lazard can be like, look, here's how this is going to work here. Here's what he's going to like. Here are the things that you're going to want to work on. And then he's going to be able to go to Aaron and go, okay, look, here's what this guy's going to. I think he could give Aaron a really good scouting report in that room. Here's what Elijah Moore's going to bring to the table if he's still on the roster. Here's what Garrett Wilson's going to bring onto the table. Here's the reliability of these guys. And here, play calling wise, here are the strengths that are going to stack up in that room. So, yeah, I like the Jets. I mean, top to bottom, I think defensively, they'll get the Quinnen Williams extension done, I assume. I think you're going to have guys that are going to take a step. I mean, Sauce Gardner, as much as we love him already, he's going to be a better player in year 2. I'm curious to see Breece Hall, how quickly they can eventually get him back in, what he looks like, because that was a really devastating injury internally there. I mean, they're like, this kid's got potential to be a 1,500-yard back. He could be Josh Jacobs to the Raiders last year. I love the Jets. I think 5 is almost conservative. I think that's kind of, to me, if they're below 5 in the AFC, that's my basement for them. Yeah. I'd be disappointed. Absolutely. Yeah. So who's your 5?
My 5 are the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I think you laid out the reasons well earlier. I mean, they showed what you need to see at the end of last year, and I just think that in some ways, so I don't think Urban Meyer was good for the NFL or good for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think those guys are kind of like bonded, and we are going to get past this. We're not going to let this define us, with Trevor leading the pack, which we saw in college he was really capable of doing, and now you're adding skill players. I think the Calvin Ridley move, like you said, is really going to pay off, and I think what they were able to do in the playoffs were really, really impressive, and so I definitely trust them to take the next step. And when you see what a leap they made from 2021 to 2022, I think that the thought of how much farther they can go and that stability with this coaching staff, with this group, is really exciting and has quite a high end. I mean, I understand why you put them up at 3.
Is Ridley their 1? He comes in as their 1, right? Like, look, no, Christian Kirk, much better signing than I anticipated. They paid him a ton of money, and actually, when you see it on the field, you're like, okay, actually, I get it, and they could probably maybe even maximize what they get out of that deal with Trevor Lawrence. A lot of that's going to depend on Lawrence continuing to take big strides, but I think Ridley's a 1 there. I think he walks in and he's probably the number 1 immediately. Am I wrong about that? I know he's had a year off, but people should not forget what he was when he was at his peak with the Atlanta Falcons. He looked like a 1.
Yeah, I think a couple things. I think one, what has he been doing the last year? We've seen guys who take time off and then just come right back in because they've been working out. We've also seen guys need to shake off the rest. I think what's cool is that I don't know how much it matters. I think that he will come in and have the opportunity to get the opportunities. I also think that Christian Kirk is still going to have a huge role in this office. And oh, by the way, they have a really strong running game too with Travis Etienne. And so I think that I like that they're going to have all of these options and that it can be a 1A and 1B situation with different skill sets rather than needing to be like, let's pick one guy to throw the ball to all the time.
Who's your AFC 6?
My AFC 6 are the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Wow. Okay. All right. I like that. That's a Pittsburgh. I had a hard time. They're not in my top 7, but I had a hard time. I stared at them for a really long time trying to figure out what I thought of them. And I just could not figure out a way to get them into the top 7. I don't disagree with this. I think there's a chance that not a lot of people have great expectations for Pittsburgh next year, and Pittsburgh could be that team that ends up surprising some people.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you should start off with is their head coach, Mike Tomlin. The fact that that guy went 9-8 with the roster he had last year, the turnover is so ridiculous. And if he can do that,
and the Watt injury, remember, some people forget that Watt missed
the Watt injury. You got this new quarterback. You're working with a rookie. You've got an offensive coordinator who's maybe not doing what you need. I mean, all of these things. The fact that they did that, and now I think Kenny Pickett showed he's got real potential in this league. Again, I'm not going to say, oh, he's not Joe Burrow. Like, I'm not saying he's in that top tier of quarterbacks, but I think he is the type of guy who you can build around. And I think that from what we saw last year, he was a really, really good pick for them. You've still got Najee Harris at running back. I think that, I don't know. The offense I've got some questions about, but I think it can take the next step. And then, like, I think bringing Larry Ogunjobi, I can never get that name right, back as a run stopper. You've got TJ Watt. You've got some of those back end guys with Minka Fitzpatrick. I just feel like that organization knows how to win, and that sounds so cheesy, but I don't mean they know how to win and like, oh, it's a good culture. It is probably a good culture, but I think even more so they just understand and have in all of Tomlin's tenure how to maximize the talent they have on that field. And I think they've got enough talent that, do I think they're going to run the AFC? No, absolutely not. But I do think that when you look at what they did last year, they're going to, yeah, they're my number 6.
Yeah,
Isaac Sumalu is now coming over from Philadelphia to protect Kenny Pickett. I think that that's a big deal as well. Help Najee Harris with the run game. I mean, I like their pieces.
It's definitely the team that I could look back at this and be like, why didn't I put them in the top 7? Like I can totally, I'm there with you, and I'm a huge Tomlin guy. So I actually put Miami at 6, and I can't lie. I mean, a lot of why I put Miami at 6 continues to be sort of my nervousness about Tua, right? And it's sort of like, okay, if you could tell me he's going to be there 100%, if it's going to be the top end Tua that we saw last year, I think they're better than 6.
Right.
And yet,
no, I think your concern is definitely valid.
It's just weird to depress it when you're sort of like, shouldn't we kind of be approaching all this from a sunny skies, standpoint? And it's just hard to do that with Miami at this point, and that's why I think I pushed them down. But I do a lot of the things that you talked about. The Jalen Ramsey addition, obviously, huge deal. Everybody's going to talk about that. Vic Fangio, I think, is a massive piece to add in terms of defensive coordinator. But they also look David Long. You sign him to a 2-year deal. It's pretty economical. Mike White. I mean, there's sort of these like depth and veteran experience signings that aren't splashy. Braxton Berrios. Not a lot of people are going to be like, oh, Braxton Berrios. But they added little nuanced pieces in free agency. They added a big piece, obviously, in the trade with Ramsey. They had a huge piece on the coaching staff in Fangio. So all told, I'm sort of like, they really addressed a lot of different layers here, and they didn't really lose anything. Like, no offense to Mike Gesicki, but he just didn't seem to fit really what they wanted to do in that offense for whatever reason. So it was like plus every time I looked at what they did and where they added. So look, you get top line Tua, and they'll still add pieces in the draft as well. I'm sure they'll probably pick up some economical free agents, at the tail end of the next couple of weeks. There's a lot of reasons why I could be completely stupid for sticking Miami at 6 when maybe Miami is more of a 2 or 3 in the AFC. So I didn't want you to think that I can't appreciate where Miami's potentially going. AFC number 7 for you.
Okay, if you feel like you could be stupid for sticking Miami at 6, you're gonna feel really crazy about my 7s. I'm really conflicted between 2 teams, and the fact one of them I have probably way too high, and the other I think I have way too low, and that's the Denver Broncos and the Buffalo Bills.
I love this. I love that the 2 teams you're battling it out with at 7.
I know, and the Bills are gonna make me. They're both. You know what's fun about this? They're both gonna make me look stupid. For this take.
Bill. First off, like the Bills fan base is like, what is like they're gonna lose their minds.
Coming after
me. The mafia is gonna be after you.
You know what? The only good thing, Charles, is, as you know, my move from Dallas to New York is quite a drawn-out process, which means that I had no address for the mafia to find me at right now.
Show up in the state of New York and immediately take the gem of a team and tank them. I wouldn't say 7's tanking them, but I just think it's interesting that the 2 that you're choosing between. I don't think like Denver fans should be like, hey, great, cool. She's basically slotting us in the playoffs. I don't know if they necessarily believe that yet. Like, I think they're like, we bought into this last year. Like, great. Sean Payton's here. Maybe it turns around. But I would say that Denver fans are probably taking a much more conservative approach to their feelings about where these rankings end up putting them. But the interesting thing is, the same way that kind of Tua, I couldn't get Tua out of my mind. It was impossible for me to even consider sticking Denver in the top 7 simply because of what was so atrocious last year there. And yet, if you asked me what team has the ability to turn based on what we saw in 2022, we saw Jacksonville turn hard just by making the right coaching decision and then seeing a quarterback get unlocked. So could Denver ultimately be Jacksonville in 2023? Could Denver be the team? Or could they be
the New York Giants? And I know that the Giants didn't have quite the situation, but think about what the Giants did in Dable's first year and sort of getting that culture right. And they've got I think Russell Wilson historically is a much more talented quarterback than Daniel Jones, even if he obviously had a worse season last year. So I don't know. I think I've kind of like, and I'm not even trying to like go out there on the limb. It was funny because one of my close friends, Catherine Fitzgerald, covers the Buffalo Bills for the Buffalo News. And I was like, am I crazy for not thinking that? And she's like, look, she definitely thinks they're going to be a playoff team. They're going to be a top 7. She goes, but I don't think you're deranged for saying that they're falling off a little bit. And I'm like, okay. So if it's a somewhat questionable take that's not deranged, that seems like fairly within the realm of a March way too early podcasting. But I do think, I don't know. I think with the Bills, the reason I'm struggling with them is you lose Leslie Frazier on the defensive side. You already saw how much trouble the offensive side had last year. And I still think they've got the players, but I think there's a difference between having the talent and being able to put it together. And I'm concerned about their consistency. And I think that I was concerned about it last year when their division was pretty winnable. And now you give them a division with the Dolphins and the Jets. And so, like, if they were not in the same division, I would be like, yeah, the Bills are one of the 7 most talented teams in the AFC. But I think when you have 4 games against those teams, I start to wonder, we see years, and this year was one of them with the NFC East, where 3 teams from the same division get into the playoffs. Like, that's not a crazy factor, but I think you have to be pretty convinced that was going to be one of them. And so I'm almost less concerned about, are the Bills a good team, and more concerned are they so good that in a division with the Jets and the Dolphins, while the Bills are, in your words, dragging, in my words, like falling off a little bit and having some trouble with consistency, is not going to be enough to get them through. With the Broncos, on the other hand, I don't think that they have given us good evidence for me to be staking this take on. But I do think that Sean Payton knows how to run a team. He knows how to run an offense. He still has some talent at quarterback. And we know he wouldn't have wanted to go there if he didn't think Russell Wilson could still be a good quarterback. I don't think that that's how Sean is wired. He didn't even want to be he loses Drew Brees. He's like, I'm done in New Orleans. Like, that's not what we're doing. If he didn't think there was potential here, I don't think he would go there. I think you get Tim Patrick back, who tore his ACL last year and missed the whole season. And hey, the second year back from ACL is typically better than first. We talked about that earlier on the podcast this week with Michael Gallup, but I think you have that. I think you have a little bit more offensive line continuity. I think you'll have some draft help. I don't know. I just think that they're not going to be a great team, but I do think that in the same way that it went badly so quickly, like you said, you see what the Vikings did with Kevin O'Connell. You see what the Giants did with Brian Dable. You see what the Jaguars did with Doug Peterson. When you get the right coach in there, it can go really well. And so I guess this take is, even though I kind of questioned leading up to the hire whether Sean Payton was the right one, I think that his belief in Russell Wilson is driving some of this for me.
Yeah, I mean, look, you talk about Tim Patrick. I mean, they had a lot of players that were hurt last year. I mean, Javonte Williams. I mean, you're going to get a number of players. They were so banged up last year. I don't think maybe people really appreciated that enough because we were so focused on just the horrible, job that Nathaniel Hackett was doing at that time. So again, it's another reason why I could look back at this and go, man, come on. You saw the head coaching change to one of the best offensive play callers in the last couple decades in the NFL. You knew that a bunch of guys were coming back from injury. They were going to have more talent there. Why didn't you think more of Denver when I was so in on them last offseason? I think it's just the residue of being burned last year that blows my mind. I'll tell you what, though. I think most people would react the way I did. To hear Denver as potentially being a playoff seed, I think.
I wish Frank Schwab was on this right now.
Yeah, I think most people would be like, "What?" Like your first instant reaction is just it's the pain of last season. I think bleeds in. I slotted the Chargers 7th.
I could not decide what to do with them.
Well, the thing is, what I didn't factor in for Denver, I did factor in for the Chargers in that I think. I'm presuming they can actually keep themselves healthy, okay, which has not been a great presumption. I'm presuming that they're going to figure out some way to keep Austin Eckler in the fold, which could be completely wrong, right? So this was definitely a sunny skies pick for me. I like Eric Kendricks. You add an inside linebacker there who's got good experience. I think he still has something left in the tank. I do think he will help that defensive front. I just think talent-wise, they have a lot if they're healthy, and they can stay healthy over the course of the season. Plus, with all due respect to what happened ultimately in Dallas and not running the damn ball and all that, I do think Kellen Moore can unlock something in Justin Herbert that maybe people don't recognize can be unlocked. I think Justin Herbert could be playing a 17-game schedule. He could be a 6,000-yard passer. I really, truly believe that. And he might do it under Kellen Moore. I think they could throw the ball a hell of a lot. Every year, the coaching staff lets us down at certain points in the season, or there are injuries at certain points of the season. And in my mind, I'm like, eventually they're going to get this right. And I think it could be, if they do, they could be a lot better than AFC 7. But even if they hit, somewhere in the middle of that, I think they're good enough to be the last playoff seed this year. I will say this about my group, okay? Not exactly the teams that I picked. It doesn't really change the playoff picture from last year, which means I'm wrong on half these. Half these teams that I picked.
That was part of the thinking for me.
Yeah,
is that like teams surprise us, and so I shouldn't just go off what happened in 2022.
Yeah, I know because I looked at the group and I'm like, I'm clearly wrong on half of these because half the playoff field doesn't make it.
History says you're wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm totally going to be wrong here. And I'm going to absolutely look back on this and be like, why did I put faith in the Chargers? Why do I keep doing that? That's what Frank needs to be on right now.
Yeah.
He and I both kind of get sucked into that every year. All right. Your plummet team in the AFC. I'll tell you what, I'll give you mine first.
No.
I'll give you mine first, so then you have a minute.
First because you made these rules. You didn't give me a heads up.
All
and
right.
If we have the same one, I want to be able to say it first.
Okay.
The Baltimore Ravens.
We have the same plummet team.
I think it was pretty obvious from the fact that neither of us included him. But here's my thinking. I don't care what happens with Lamar Jackson from here.
You and I are totally locked in. This is the same thing I'm
glad
thinking.
I'm saying it first. I think if Lamar Jackson goes elsewhere, the Ravens are screwed. If Lamar Jackson plays on the franchise tag, they have a quarterback they're mad at. It means they didn't come to terms and figure things out. And remember, no agent. This is them fighting with each other and not resolving it. That's an issue. If they put him on a long-term contract, expectations go sky high. You already have all this discord that has hurt some trust around the building. Who that's directed at doesn't really matter. I don't think you can come back from this. That doesn't mean that he can never be a good player again. But, and new offensive coordinator, by the way, and injuries that he's coming off of, which he wants us to believe are serious. And so I'm going to take his word for that. I'm not saying they're not, but I'm saying we should believe they're serious if he's going to tell us they're serious. That's what he wants. And I think he knows better than we know about his health. You put that together, I don't see how the Ravens have a good year in 2023. Oh, and by the way, if I'm going to call out other people like the AFC East for having guys in their division, the Bengals are winning that division. So
AFC North is going to be brutal. And by the way, Cleveland could be terrible next year, or Deshaun Watson could click back into the player that they thought they were acquiring. And if he does, then that also changes the sort of the dynamic of how we look at the AFC North. So to me, I look at the AFC North as potentially, once again, being brutal again. That there was sort of this opportunity last year. If you were going to make some hay, you had to kind of make it last year because everybody was kind of still going through some stuff. I think some of that cleans up. But the way you described it with Lamar Jackson, that's 100% my thinking. I'm with you, like all the way. If he leaves, yeah, there's going to be a massive Death Star-sized hole in your roster. If he stays, though, yeah, I don't know how you deal with this. If he plays under the tag, I mean, it's going to be this constant storyline all year long. People are going to be asking nonstop. And if they're not, we're all going to be watching his social media account all year. You know, who is he going to be fighting with fans again? Or, you know, if there's some uneven play, then that all automatically becomes, well, good thing they didn't do the deal. And now they definitely can't do the deal. And should they even tag him in 2024 at this point? Yeah, I just think it's a total mess and it feels awkward. And like you said, there's a coaching staff change that we'll see how it ultimately works out with the new OC there. Yeah, it just has the feel of a team that absolutely, in my mind, could be. I mean, they could be a 5-12 team next year. Who knows? This could really go badly for them. So you're right. You should have said it first because I would have.
I wasn't letting you make you could have your cake, but you can't eat it too, C-Rob.
Yeah. Well, I shouldn't be having any cake this offseason. I need less cake in my life, I can tell you that. All right, before we swing over to the NFC, let's do an ad break real quick. We'll get to our sponsors and come back on the other side. All right, let's get to the NFC, and we'll zoom through this one a little more quickly. I think the AFC, if we did a total overall power rankings, the AFC would be very top heavy in the overall power rankings. NFC is going to be a little more of a crapshoot after we get through the first couple. But I do want to press on this a little, the pace. Let's move a little faster. I'll kick it off. Look, Philly to me still the number one, but and this should suggest how crazy the NFC could be this year. You lose 5 players on defense that were very, very heavily involved in what you did and your success in 2022. I have a big question about that. And what I think keeps them at that number one spot is I assume Jalen Hurts is going to continue to ascend. I assume that offense is going to continue to be better, but there's no Miles Sanders now. Right. And I thought Miles Sanders was probably a far more respectable running back than a lot of people gave him credit for. I think my bottom line is for Philly, I loved what they did last year. I love their general manager. I think the head coach did a hell of a job. But it's also a team that lost both coordinators, lost the starting running back, lost a ton of starting pieces on defense or contributing pieces on defense. It's going to have to play a lot of rookies, and there's going to be some inexperience there. Do I think they're number one? Yes. Do I think it's a shaky number one in the NFC? Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. Again, I didn't put both of the Super Bowl teams as top one, but I did put one of them. And yeah, I have the Eagles at number one. I think that Jalen Hurts showed us a lot of potential, and I'm excited to see what he can do next year. I think that I was concerned a couple weeks ago about how many players they seemed primed to lose. And then they brought back a Brandon Graham, a Fletcher Cox, a James Bradbury, Darius Slay, all while still having a receiving core like A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. And so I think that they kept enough players. Like, yeah, you lose a guy on either side of the trenches, but I think that they've got their core intact. They have the talent, and they just have a game plan that's um, I think that it's not what the rest of the league is doing, and that's a really good thing in terms of how teams defend on it, because so many of these, like, pass-heavy attacks first again, Jalen Hurts progressed a lot as a passer this year, but he's not only that, and they were such a run-heavy team. You think about the quarterback sneak, I think the fact that they're doing things that a lot of teams aren't prioritizing and emphasizing in the same way makes them harder to scheme against because it's not something you're used to doing every year. And even though they lost Miles Sanders, they've got 2 first-round picks, including the 10th overall pick. They can replace that's so ridiculous that they just went to the Super Bowl and have the 10th overall pick. That just shows you what kind of team building strategy they've gone about and how it's working. So, yeah, I think that they kept a lot of what they needed to keep, and they have the capital to reload.
All right, so we agree on one. Number 2. What's your number 2?
San Francisco 49ers.
We're going to agree on 2 as well. I'll let you take this one. I will have very short remarks on this.
If you could tell me that they were going to have quarterback stability, I might put them as number 1.
Right.
And I'm not saying you need to tell me they're getting like an Aaron Rodgers type. If you told me Brock Purdy was playing 17 games, I think I'd put them as number 1. I think that the skill set they have, the offense they have, the Christian McCaffrey, what he could do. I mean, just so many things on offense. I just trust that they're going to keep moving the ball. And I love what they do on the defensive line. To add Javon Hargrave from the Eagles, Nick Bosa, and Arik Armstead, to have a top 3 coach in the league, if not higher than that, and they've been there, they know what it takes, and they keep going back. What more could you want? And that's really just the quarterback stability. So I don't know if it'll be Trey Lance, Brock Purdy. I think they brought Sam Darnold in as well. I'm not quite as confident in him, but I will say that quarterbacks succeed with Kyle Shanahan. And so I don't think that Sam Darnold is going to like really, really struggle, even if I don't know that he'll be Brock Purdy, because I think that we weren't giving Brock Purdy enough credit when he was doing what he was doing. And we saw that pretty clearly when he went out against the Eagles in the playoffs. I trust the 49ers to be back in the mix strongly next year.
Yeah, I'm with you. I have the same reservations you do. You look at quarterback and you're like, it would be nice to know who's the starter there. Be nice to know whether or not Purdy's going to rebound from the elbow surgery. Who knows with, Trey Lance and the ankle surgery. Sam Darnold, I mean, again, I think you protect him. You run the ball a heck of a lot. I think he can be a very good, competent, I think he'd be a very competent starting quarterback who doesn't have to do a lot. I've made the comparison to the Trent Dilfer Baltimore Ravens that won the Super Bowl. That's how dominant I think this defense could be. I think Steve Wilkes is going to get a shot at being a head coach after next season. That's how good I think their defense is going to be. The Hargrave, as you said, that addition on the defensive line is amazing. Very, one-sided team in terms of total dominance, definitely defense, but it's not like all the pieces around whoever the quarterback is on offense won't be able to flourish too. So I'm with you, though. They could have easily been the number 1 if I just knew a little bit more about what I could expect from the quarterback position. Swinging it. So we agree on number 2. Number 3, I'm going to go with the Cowboys. I'm not huge on this because I think once you get past the top 2 in the NFC, I actually think who knows what 3 to 7 could end up looking like in the NFC. But I'm gonna stick with the Cowboys. I think the addition of a wide receiver at the number 2 spot in Brandon Cooks is huge for this offense. I think weirdly enough, I think Zeke going out of the door, to me, suggests some element of clarity in the backfield there. I just want to know what's going to happen with Tony Pollard. How is he going to look, obviously coming off of injury? I know they made the OC change, but let's be honest, I think it's someone that Mike's very comfortable with when you make that OC change defensively. Obviously, Dan Quinn's still there. I just think talent-wise, top to bottom, this should still slot in as a top 3 team in the NFC pretty easily. And if it's just about keeping guys healthy and all that. So but it does speak to me a little bit that I kind of felt like I had to put them at 3 just because of how weird the NFC stacks up to me.
I love that you had them higher than me.
Really?
And that Michigan Charles is going to have the Detroit Lions lower than I have them. because I have the Detroit Lions at number 3. And I think if you look at what they did the second half of last season, the way their offense is going, the same way we talked about keeping Louis Anarumo on defense for the Cincinnati Bengals, keeping Ben Johnson on offense for the Lions, I think is huge. I think that people are going to doubt Jared Goff because of the way that Sean McVay so publicly was like, he's not what I'm looking for. He played really well, especially toward the second half of last year. They've still got DeAndre Smith, Amon-Ra St. Brown. I know they lost Jamal Williams, who had 17 touchdowns rushing, but I think that his market and the way that Montgomery was replaced kind of shows you what other teams thought about it. And you and I talked about this earlier this week, I think on the podcast, or maybe it was on the side, is that teams tell you what they think of guys based on like the way they do in that market. And so I don't think we should be overly concerned about what you're going to lose. You got Aiden Hutchinson and Kirby Joseph, who broke out on the scene last year. And then they added a CJ Gardner-Johnson to kind of stabilize that defense even more and play the way that Dan Campbell wants them to play. Also, remember, they're now in a conference or in a division that no longer has Aaron Rodgers. And so I just think that they could totally run that division. And I think they can go more than that. The way that they played the second half of this year, if they had played like that the whole year, we would all be having them higher.
Oh, so, yeah,
I've got them at 3.
All right. Well, that makes it easy for me because I slotted them 4, but I did have that debate in my mind, like, okay, how they played down the stretch, maybe they are the third best team in the NFC at this point in the offseason. Plus, let's remember, they have 2 first-round picks, including one that's in the top 6. So they are going to add it's just what I couldn't get over is just how, like, as good as the offense was, you lose your top touchdown scorer. And I agree, like his market kind of revealed that what people ultimately thought about him. And David Montgomery is probably an upgrade, I think, if we're being honest, at the running back position, as much as I love Jamal Williams. I'm curious to see what that does to the heart on that team because he was a very big emotional heart.
I loved his post-game interviews.
Yeah. I mean, he really was. And so, you don't know what that ultimately does to the locker room. So that's a little bit concerning to me. I think I couldn't get over the fact that the defense was just on balance atrocious last year. Now I get it. As you said, they add Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. That's huge. They do it on the 1-year deal. Cam Sutton, Emmanuel Mosley. I would suspect they're probably going to add 2 defensive pieces in the first round. Yeah. In my mind, that's what you end up doing.
And when you see how they drafted guys like Hutchinson and Joseph last year, I think that you should have reason to believe in that front office's ability
that they
to
could
find
do
defensive talent in the draft.
Yeah, I can. Certain people in that front office, you can sort of see the hallmarks of what some of the talent they've already added in the last, 12 to 24 months. So, I'm with you. I think that Detroit absolutely could be 3. I'm slotting them at 4, but again, I think it's after 2 in the NFC. A lot of these for me are going to be interchangeable. Who's your 4?
Okay, my 4 is the Cowboys. I think it's ironic that for people who think we're homers, you're from Detroit, not just Michigan, right?
I lived in Detroit.
Metro Detroit. Yeah, so you the Michigan guy picked the Cowboys ahead of them, and the Dallas native picked the Lions ahead. So we're not just homers toward where we grew up, everybody who's listening. But yeah, I think the Cowboys have one of the more talented rosters in the NFL, and I think that the moves they just made for Brandon Cooks at receiver and Stephon Gilmore in the secondary, both of which they didn't have to totally break the bank for, were great moves. I think that they had the talent last year too. And I strongly believe in this defense. I think that Dan Quinn, getting him back another year is just an absolute steal, and I think that I really like what Gilmore can do in terms of helping Trayvon Diggs come along, because Trayvon Diggs obviously had an insane year in 2021 when he had all those interceptions, but like you can't have your career based on that, unfortunately, when you look at the course of NFL history. And he needs to continue to progress. He became a better tackler last year and he became a little more sure, but he needs a guy like Gilmore who can help bring him along. So defensively, I'm not so concerned about this group. I think it was super smart. They brought back Donovan Wilson, who you're talking about the heart of a team. He was that like physical heart. They've still got a Micah Parsons like talent. On offense, I agree. I'm not so concerned about Zeke. I do have a few questions about Tony Pollard just because he's coming back from a broken leg, better bone than ligament, but I will be very curious. Like my dad was asking me, hey, if Bijan Robinson's still there at 26, do you take him? And I was like, absolutely, because they're going to need a guy like that for the future. And I don't know that you take him at 15 or 10 if you're the Cowboys based on, and you have Tony Pollard, but at 26, that's great value. My number one concern is Mike McCarthy calling the plays. And again, I've worked with him. I really, really like him as a person. I do not believe that he wants to call the plays. He says he does. I don't believe that he does. And I think that when Jerry Jones told me that it was a mutual decision, I do not think it was a mutual decision. I understand why it's happening. And I think there can be some good that comes out of it in the sense of maybe Kellen's style wasn't perfect for Dak's game, and there's a little course correction there. I think that there's ability for this. I think a play caller can get rusty. Mike McCarthy hasn't called plays since like middle of 2018. And he plans to call plays, not Brian Schottenheimer. So I just have questions about some of the creativity that you need to win in today's game. And maybe this will be good because it will allow their defense to really be the star of the show. I do think that I definitely don't expect Dak Prescott to have 15 interceptions again. I don't even know that he'll have 10, but I don't know. I have some questions about the moving part, even though I think the talent is there. And having been around the Cowboys as much as I have, I just need to see them go farther for me to believe they're going to go farther. I covered the Longhorns in college and the Cowboys in the NFL, and I just kind of believe that there's something about the glitz and glamour of both of those teams that precludes success.
As they say in the draft, well, he is a Texas guy. He's a UT guy. It was always like there's a little bit of like, is there a little softness there because of how UT players are treated? And
it's not about the individuals, but it's like the culture and what you look at. I don't know.
Same with the Cowboys,
I think
right?
It hurts their ability to win, in my opinion. Now they can win in spite of it, but I don't think they win because of it.
All right, my NFC number 5. And again, these are going to get jumbled here. I'm going to put the Seattle Seahawks at 5.
Interesting.
I think adding Draymond Jones, Devin Bush. I know it was a catastrophe in Pittsburgh. I'll never be able to fully understand what happened there. I still think there's a chance Devin Bush can be a productive NFL player and a consistent NFL player. I like him going to Seattle and then maybe potentially bring Bobby Wagner back, which I think would be really great for Bush to be paired with a player of that caliber. Second year with Geno Smith, I think Geno Smith has a chance to be a better player than he was last year. He's the guy now. He knows he's the guy. He got the contract. That's all settled. He's moving forward with this team. As long as they don't do anything wild in the draft, to make me question this. And again, this is a team with the 5th overall pick in the draft too. They should get a player there that is of substance. They had a great rookie class last year. That's going to get better. It's just sort of the collection of everything. I would like to see them bring Bobby Wagner back in the fold. I think that's an important thing that they could do to help steady that defense. Just from a leadership and an experience standpoint. But overall, I feel like things have kind of settled down there in Seattle, and now they have young pieces that they're now going to build on top of moving forward. And I like them being a strong team in the NFC again.
I think this is good because I think it's a good check on my biases that even though I'm not fully a New Yorker yet, I think I've got some East Coast bias in me because I guess I shouldn't say where I do or don't have the Seahawks.
You're putting the Giants here. I know you're putting the Giants here. Come on.
You know what? I was talking to some friends about this, and I was like, look, my new plan is like be a homer on the podcast, but not a homer for where I grew up. I'm a homer from people who help me tell stories. And I will be like fully transparent that I will sacrifice my podcast credibility in terms of sourcing so that people will keep talking to me for my stories. That being said, you said, I'm going to use everything you said when you're in your Bills take against you, that the Bills are dragging, which I used against you already. And you said that the Bills losing Brian Dable is hurting them. So the same way that has been a big loss for Buffalo, I think it has been a big gain for the New York Giants. And I think what they did in that first year and how quickly they turned it around, kind of like what we were talking about with Jacksonville, why can't they build off it? Keeping Saquon Barkley another year. Again, if Saquon's hurt, I fully renounce this take because I think he's so important to that offense. But I do think that Daniel Jones finally getting a coach who seems to be able to contribute to his success rather than detract from it has been big. I don't think he's the best quarterback in the league, but I think he can do it. I think they've got Saquon Barkley. I like the moves they made with guys like Darren Waller. And I think that on defense, they still have Dexter Lawrence, Leonard Williams, Kayvon Thibodeau. They've got a little bit of the back end. Maybe their secondary will not ride ATVs during the season. I would recommend that if they're going to keep what they can do. And so, I don't know. I just feel like they still have kind of what you're looking for. They've got that culture and the talent to go with it. And the pieces that were probably assembled a little bit better in the Gettleman era than they were given credit for are now finally getting the reinforcements they need to really show. So, the same way I had trouble putting 3 AFC East teams in the playoffs. I have a little bit of trouble with 3 NFC East teams, but I do think that the Giants, the way they won last year is how you need to be able to win the close games in the NFL.
Well, that's good. That's a good transition because they're my 6, and it's based on basically everything. What
You're putting them at 5. You have the Giants. You have them 1 spot lower.
I mean, well, I knew. Come on, I know the source relationships there. I knew they were going to creep up based on some of the inroads.
I'm transparent about it.
Look, Waller's a big addition. Daniel Jones, I think, having the contract done, and there's not the whole question hanging over him that there was all of last season, I think matters. Saquon having that bounce back year under his belt. It's so offensively, there's a lot of things that I think should take another step forward, and people should like about the Giants, especially, look, Waller, add a tight end of that magnitude who's got something to prove, even though I don't know he's necessarily the player we thought he was. It's not that there's not any questions, but the ability is there to continue to make big strides on offense. I like Thibodeau a lot, by the way. And I think that, this could be that breakout. I thought he was very strong as a rookie. I think this could be the breakout year for him. The front end of the defense, I love. And they still have an ability to make some additions as we go through the draft process. So to me, that was a pretty, in the NFC, which I think is messy.
Right.
It makes sense to slot them at 6.
One last thing I'll say about them before we get to my 6 is that the same way you're saying Waller has something to prove, I think the Giants, with the Jets going all out for Aaron Rodgers, have something to prove in their city, and I think that they're going to use that, and I think that's awesome. Aaron Rodgers will be motivated by what the Packers did or didn't do for him, and the Giants will be motivated on, hey, you don't have to go for a guy like Rodgers to compete.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. That's the thing. That's a real thing in New York, by the way. They do. I think it does matter. Those two teams kind of staring at each other. So, who's your 6?
The Chicago Bears.
Holy. Okay. All right. We're going to do this then. All right. Roll. Let it go.
Everywhere you used to live, I'm just going to be pro. I have a number 6, the Chicago Bears. I may come to regret this take, but you may have come to regret not trusting anybody that wasn't in the playoffs last year. I don't know if you watched a man named Justin Fields light up the league last year. I don't know if you're aware that he no longer has Aaron Rodgers in his division. I don't know if you're aware that his defensive-minded coach just got a couple of key pieces, including stealing one from the Buffalo Bills and Tremaine Edmonds. And I don't know if you're aware that they have pretty decent draft capital. I know they gave up the number 1 pick because they didn't need a quarterback, which I think that confidence will fuel Justin Fields. And I think that defensively, they're going to continue to load up. So I don't know. Give them a chance. Give them a chance.
Seahawks slander, Vikings slander. This might be Carolina Panthers slander. I don't even know if in the overall totality of power rankings
6 for me.
I don't know if in the overall totality of power rankings, I would have even put Chicago in the top 25. Now, if I did, I would say this. I would say that, Fields, it's sort of like...
Okay, Stone, clip this in case we need it for November.
Yeah, go ahead. You can clip it because I will tell you what would make them great.
Okay.
Number 1, Fields takes another big step forward. I thought last year was a big step forward over the course of the season. I think he has to take a big step forward now as a passer this year, but I also think they've now given him opportunities to do so because you have a number 1 wide receiver in DJ Moore. You have Chase Claypool. You have Darnell Mooney, who, really is a very talented player. Cole Kmet, Robert Tonyan. It's a lot of guys to throw to now on that offense. So they've instilled the ability, if they can now protect him on the offensive line, I would assume that the number 9 overall pick is probably going to be an offensive lineman. To me, then that all comes together. Hey, we gave you weapons to throw to. You're not just going to be running around like you're Michael Vick. And so offensively, we make a huge stride. It's just defensively.
Which they did add Nate Davis already to that offensive line.
Right, they did. So, yeah, okay. Is there a path to this? Yeah, well, the NFC's messy. So there's going to be a path for a lot of teams, I think, at this point.
Embrace the chaos, C-Rob.
That is. Embrace the chaos. That's a little bit of a chaotic pick. All right, so... my 7, real quick. Carolina Panthers.
Yeah.
I think that the Panthers, the totality of the pieces on offense and defense are actually pretty good. I know they don't have a lot of people to throw to right now after you get rid of DJ Moore. I know that they don't have a quarterback yet. I do think that's going to be resolved in the draft. You have a head coaching change there in Frank Reich that's going to make a really big difference. I do think they're going to get a hell of a good quarterback because they're going to get basically the pick of the litter. And so I plus, despite everything that Atlanta has done this offseason, Tampa adding a quarterback and, the Saints adding a quarterback, I still think that the Panthers actually have a pretty good shot to win the NFC South. So that's my pick at 7.
Yeah, no, I'll be real quick here because I agree. I think they're the best team in the NFC South by a mile. I think that in some ways this is as much in spite of them trading up as it is because I think that even though they'll get a really good player, there's so much pressure on that first overall quarterback pick that I think that it might take a little bit of time. But like you said, if there's going to be a cast to bring him into, I think it's Frank Reich. I think in some ways it's great that Carolina is an interesting team, but not like a New York type spotlight team. I think he'll be able to grow with a little bit less lights on his future. And yeah, I mean, I think that coaching wise and talent wise, also, again, look at what they did after Matt Rule was fired. I don't think that they're a lost cause. They've got guys like Brian Burns on defense as well. So yeah, I'm Carolina Panthers 7. And like you said, I wouldn't have been totally opposed to them at 6.
Okay, I'm going to name a plummet team. I actually have 2 in the NFC, and you're going to be the tiebreaker for which one is the plummet team.
Ooh,
okay?
Interesting. Okay, I have
Packers
1 and then
Rams.
2.
Packers and Rams. You got it. You must have picked.
What are the
Packers
Rams plummeting from?
I think people are going to look at last year and they're going to say, well, they didn't have Stafford. They had injuries. Stafford's going to come back and they'll just, they'll bounce back. Yeah, they moved Ramsey, but that had to do with money, not necessarily production. No, I don't know. The Rams all of a sudden are feeling really messy to me. And the whole Sean McVay, how, does he want to be there? How much longer does he want to be there? All that stuff, I think, is a total mess. Packers, obviously, Aaron Rodgers isn't going to be there. Who the hell knows what ultimately that's going to look like. If you have a plummet team that's not those two, give it to me. But I also want you to tell me between those two, which do you think is the bigger plummet team?
Yeah, so I will say, I think that you don't understand the rules of your own game, or in daylight savings time, you went back a year because the Los Angeles Rams were 5-12 last year. So unless plummeting means they're going to have 1 win, I don't even know. Also,
there's an assumption they're going to bounce back.
Also, why would they even tank? Do they even have draft picks if they tank? So yeah, I think that they're messy, but I think they've been messy for a year. Maybe you've been denial.
My rules were not perfect. Okay, plummeting
I will
from
also
2021.
say, because we got to get out of here, I will say that the 2 teams that I think will plummet, but I don't think that they were helpful picks, are the Packers and the Bucks, and that's because they're losing Aaron Rodgers, presumably, and Tom Brady. I didn't think that those were interesting enough picks because I think it's pretty clear that if you move on from a generational quarterback, you're going to plummet. I went with the Vikings. I don't feel great about this, but I also think, and I feel like a hypocrite because I just said the Giants won at the end, blah, blah, blah. Were the Vikings good or a facade? And I know they can, and I think what makes me feel better about me kind of playing both sides of this card with the Giants and Vikings is what happened in the playoffs, not just in their matchup, but I think the Giants kind of got better when they had to, and the Vikings kept almost giving things away until they did give things away. I would love to be proven wrong because they have so many fun pieces of talent, including Justin Jefferson. I love. I think that they had a great trade for TJ Hawkinson. I don't know. The Vikings make me nervous.
Yeah, they won a lot of close games last year. They had too many comeback games. That's the kind of team that a year later, when they all of a sudden aren't coming back and they aren't hitting all these green lights, things can change pretty quickly. So I understand the ideology of that. I just don't get not wanting to bet on the Vikings, but wanting to bet on the Bears. All right, Jori, I know you got to get out of here. I appreciate it. Let's close it out. We will be back on Monday. You can get Jori on Twitter at Jori Epstein. You can get myself at Charles Robinson. You can get our ace producer, Stone Rochelle, at SJ Rochelle. And as always, please help us keep Terez Paylor's legacy alive. Check out breakingtea.com/Terez for the All Juice tee or hoodie. Remember that proceeds from that go to support the Terez A. Paylor Scholarship at Howard University. You can also support that scholarship directly, as well as the one in his name at Power Mizzou, if you check out our podcast description. Also, just want to give a little bit of a plug here. Make sure you check out our new NBA podcast, Ball Don't Lie, featuring Vinny Goodwill, Jake Fisher, and Dan Devine. And also our new MLB podcast, Bandwagon, featuring Hannah Kaiser, Zach Kreiser, both available wherever you get your podcasts. So check that
And
out.
two super brief plugs on my end. I'll say one, I published a story this week on Brandon Cooks and why has this man been traded 4 times, which is a record, tied for the record of most ever in the NFL, and kind of tracked down people he'd worked with on each of his previous teams, from the Saints to the Patriots to the Rams to the Texans and now the Cowboys. So if y'all haven't read that yet, definitely go to the site. I learned a lot reporting it, and I think you'll learn something reading it. And the other thing I'll say is we obviously did something a little bit different with this podcast, kind of going with a theme, rolling with it. So you guys are our listeners. Like, what do you want? One, let us know what you thought of this, because I think that we want to continue to evolve this podcast over the course of the off season to what you're interested in. If there's anything similarly themed like this that you're looking for, please tweet at us, email us, comment on something. Don't comment on our website. We won't look at it, but reach out to us, because like we want to make this something that y'all continue to enjoy and love.
Yeah. Take part. Help us improve it. We would
Teamwork.
really love that. Yeah, you're part of the team. You're part of the family. And if you could add a 5-star review, tell a friend, grow the pod, help us develop it. It's going to be a big off season for that between Jori, myself, and Charles McDonald. So once again, please tip in. We'll see you next week, Monday. Peace.